Hey, folks, welcome back. Excited and honored to have you here today with my guest, our first time meeting. Welcome, Philip.
Delighted to be here. Thank you, Forrest.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Philip Shepard is my guest today. Philip, you're a multi multi book author. You have multiple books out: New Self, New World, Radical Wholeness, and Deep Fitness. You are also the founder of the Embodied Present process, and I imagine there's a lot more to you than those few descriptors. So yeah, excited to meet you. Excited and truly grateful to have you on the show. I've told you already, you've had a profound impact on my life, and um, really appreciating having you here and getting to hang out and explore together today.
I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you. Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the things I'd love for you to know about the show, and also that I'm going to invite our listeners into in real time, is that this is a field first podcast. And so we actually pay attention to the field of consciousness that we're speaking from as we're hanging out here and in exploration together. So we welcome the larger we, all the
Mm.
human beings who are going to tune in different now moments through space and time. So welcome to all of you, all of our listeners. Thank you for being here. And yeah, as always, for everyone listening, I just want to invite you to take a couple of breaths, and I'll do this with you. Yeah, as you're aware, if you've joined us before, the invitation is to relax into and be resourced by the field that this podcast is recorded from, and to notice not only what we're talking about, but also where we're speaking from. So welcome. It's good to have you here, and welcome, Philip.
It's nice the way you put language to that, speaking from a field. I mean, it's something I tend to do. I've just not named it in that way, and it's helpful. It's lovely.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm curious, what's happening for you in this moment?
What I tend to do, and it's sort of automatic now, is dropping, dropping, dropping. And it's a little like a drop of water landing on a pond. As my center of awareness drops, there is this dilation that ripples into the world and includes more and more and more. And I, to the best of my ability, rest within that.
Mm.
And it's pretty tender and always moving. And it's what holds me in its embrace. What's happening for you in this moment?
Well, if anyone's on audio only, you might not be seeing me just beaming over here, hearing Philip right now. You might feel me beaming. I know that's available to those of us who drop down and open up our sensorial capacities. Um, but yeah, I have a practice, personal practice, and also a workshop I lead that's called Deep, Deep, Deep. And
Mm.
together we sink until we touch the base of being.
Do you locate the base of being in your body or in your consciousness? How do you feel that?
Yeah, it's the first answer that comes to me is that there are many bases of beings, right? There's one in the body, uh,
Where do you locate that in the body?
at the base of the pelvic bowl.
Yeah. For me, there are two in the body. One is the perineum,
Mm.
um, and the other is the soles of the feet.
Oh, beautiful.
So for me, I distinguish between my center of awareness, um, the center of my thinking, the center from which I am aware of the world, and how that can be in the head or it can drop down through the body. And for me, when that lands on the pelvic floor, on the perineum, I feel my core, the core of my being, activated. The other side of that, though, is my energy. So to feel my body's energy, and in our culture, that energy tends to become roiled. It climbs higher and higher, especially in a stressful situation, until it's a lightning storm in the head under stress. And to feel the body's energy and give it permission, give it the recognition and the love, I suppose, that allows it to drop down through the body to rest on the earth. And as that happens for me, it's like a tripod of my being. So there is the energy at rest on the earth, and the center of awareness at rest on the perineum, and each supports the other. And when I'm at rest in that tripod on the earth, in the pelvic bowl, it gives me, it's not quite a stability, but it enables me to stand in the river of the present without needing to resist any of it. Is how it feels.
Yeah, beautiful. I get a lovely image hearing you speak of this tripod. Uh,
Mm.
I might be missing the third leg though. I see the base of the
Well,
2 feet.
so the 2 feet
Yeah.
are two legs of the tripod,
Yeah.
and the perineum is the third.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel my energy kind of cascade down through my body to meet the earth and rest there. And the center of my awareness drop down, down to come to rest in the pelvic bowl. Yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of bases of being, I also experience one in consciousness itself. And so there's like, yeah, a base of being in the concrete body, the soles of the feet and the perineum. There's a base of being in the subtle energy body. And then there's a base of being in awareness itself. That's my experience. And so the harmony between these three has been challenging at times for me.
Yeah, I feel it. I spoke earlier about that dilation, that when my awareness dilates into the world and comes to rest there, that's what I feel as the the base of being within consciousness. I am here, nothing is excluded. There is no border. And the subtlety is crucially important to me. I've got a line in my first book, New Self, New World: be still and know that life is subtle. And it is that. We live in such a coarse, grossly conceived environment, and to shed that and drop down to the subtlest awareness of which you're capable. And suddenly I find myself anyway simply attuning. And it's like this massive download of information that doesn't come in bits and pieces, but comes in waves that touch and inform and guide me. And I cherish the subtlety that opens me to that.
Yeah, in this moment, I feel a subtle wave that's inviting me to ask you about newness and what's coming up for you in your experience that feels fresh, that feels new.
I mean, newness in general, it's always there, but there are these two different ways of relating to the world. One is the way in which we've been trained, which is known relationships. I can look around the room I'm in and I know what everything is. I look out my window and I know that's a tree and that's a house and that's a street light. There's very little that I encounter in the course of a day that is new to me in that sense of I don't know what it is. And when I live in a world of known relationships, almost nothing needs to be felt. If you know what it is, why would you bother feeling it? What's the point? And so we move through life. It's just a tendency in our culture, knowing what everything is and not being present to it, not feeling its presence. And so newness for me is what happens every time I come into felt relationship with the world. And we've got this thing about self-knowledge that we were told, go inside and find out who you are. I think there's a place for that journey inside. You've got to encounter what's there. You've got to be willing to feel it. But I don't think self-knowledge lies there. I think that journey into the body is one that enables you to bring home the orphans of energy, the stuck energies in the body that obstruct your spaciousness. And once you recover the spaciousness of your being, then there is room enough within you for all the world to be felt. And that is what enables self-knowledge. When I come into felt relationship with the world, whether it's with a child playing on the sidewalk or bird song or a tree, and I feel its presence, I am illuminated. I'm illuminated by the world, not by myself, not by holding a flashlight and pointing it down inside myself. It's through felt relationship that I am illuminated. So the more deeply I come into felt relationship with the world, the more deeply I discover who I am. And that's always a new experience for me. Again, we tend to have this construct, almost like a grocery list. This is who I am. These are my favorite movies, and this is the video game I like, and these are the books I read, and this is my diet, and on, and that's who I am. And there is an endarkenment to that process. You know, if you establish for yourself who you are as a sort of security, if that's where your security lies, then you're in the position of needing to defend who you are when it's slighted or contradicted or called into question. And I would much rather go the other way, join the present, which is always unknown. You can never know the present, but you can feel it. And it's through that host of relationships that I am carried and revealed. Kind of a long answer to a simple question.
Yeah, please feel free to keep going. I'm happy to just sit here and listen. This is great.
Yeah, I'm reading, there's a book by Ian McGilchrist called The Matter with Things. And it's not really a book, it's two books. And it's really two very big books. And it is a monumental achievement. And it is such a gift to humanity that I don't know that humanity is capable of receiving. But his life's work is really about the differentiation between the way the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of the brain see the world. And it's not that we have one brain in the head. There are really two brains that feel the world radically differently. And newness, just to follow up on that theme, is a right hemisphere property. The left hemisphere categorizes it. It wants things to be consistent. It wants things to be controllable. It is incapable of feeling the whole. It is intolerant of paradox. And by contrast, the right hemisphere attunes to the whole. It doesn't see separate parts. It sees a unified field. And it is welcoming of ambiguity and paradox. And as a result, it feels the newness, or it's capable of feeling the newness of each moment. And I just last night, in fact, finished the first of the two volumes. I'm looking forward to the second. But what Ian McGilchrist holds up as the distinctions between right hemisphere and left hemisphere, I feel as the distinction between a body-based awareness and a head-based awareness. So when I'm living in my head, the characteristics of how I see the world map precisely onto left hemisphere characteristics. And when I drop into the body, the body, I join what the body understands. I think what the body most deeply understands is that it belongs. The body feels kinship in every ordinary particular of the world around me. It belongs to the plant behind me. It belongs to the sky. It belongs to the breeze. And what the body, I think, most deeply feels is the present. That's where it is. It is attuning in every moment to the present. And I think what the body most deeply recognizes is that everything is alive. And how wondrous to rest in the body and feel the aliveness of the moment and the way in which the aliveness of everything around you is participant in that. And that too, with that sensitivity to aliveness, how could anything be stale? reminds me of a Joseph Campbell quote. Joseph Campbell is the great mythologist, the hero with 1,000 faces. Um, and and he talked about the hero's call as a submission. So he characterizes the hero of myth as the man of self-achieved submission. And I feel that submission essentially as a submission to the present. But I think, when I am present, it's not a passive state. And what I mean by that is, as I come more and more deeply into relationship with the present, as I more and more deeply rest in this moment, I am activated. I am summoned. I think each of us has this unique cluster of gifts, and at every moment in our lives, the world is whispering to us to put those into service. And as I come to rest, that whisper becomes clearer and clearer. And so I am activated. And then, Joseph Campbell says you can heed the call, you can allow that activation, or you can retreat from it. And he says, if you retreat from the call, you consign yourself to a realm of organized inadequacy. And I think that is such a gorgeous phrase. That is what our lives are funneled into by our culture, is organized inadequacy. And if you answer the call, you are, potentially risking everything and plunging into the newness of the unknown.
I was gonna say you're singing the song in my heart, but maybe I should say you're singing the song in the base of my being.
Uh, thank you.
Thank you. It's beautiful. And I want to name that what's happening for me is that uh my passion is, after finding works like yours and discovering this and going, oh my God, there's a whole new self, new world, right? To use your book title, there's a whole new way of walking through the world, a whole different way to experience reality and to be in relationship with everything. I mean, there's nothing that's not connected, and just to be a part of the living, breathing whole.
So, I mean, that's the very essence of my work, of my passion. I look at what we have become as a human society, and I mean, you could name the ills we've foisted upon the world. The insect holocaust, the warming of the oceans, the fires, the plastic in the. I mean, you could go on and on, and we're trying to tinker, as I see it, with how we interact with the world. Or let's recycle. Or let's get an electric car, and to my way of thinking, our way of being is toxic, and we need a new way of being, and that needs that will be created by everyone. And it's the toxicity that I see in our world is a direct result of living in the head. The head, the strength of that intelligence in the head is that it gains perspective. You can pull things to pieces, you can gain perspective, you can understand them in a certain way. And what enables perspective is distance. It's when you distance yourself from something that you gain perspective on it. And the head does that. It's living in the head puts you at a distance from the world around you and gives it the semblance of being things rather than your very life. And until we come back to the body and its recognition of the whole, its sense of harmony, our species for 95% of the life of our species, we survived by virtue of joining the world's harmony and participating in it and enjoying the benefits of that. And there are indigenous cultures to this day that still know how to do that. There's so many that come to mind, but I'm thinking at the moment of the Aleut culture. So the Aleut nation lives in those islands that trail off Alaska and separate the Bering Sea from the Pacific Ocean. And it's a seafaring nation. And their relationship with the sea lion is akin to the relationship the Plains Indians had with the bison. And there's an Aleut elder, Ilarion Merkuliev. He's got a couple of really wonderful TED Talks and a book. And he speaks about, as a kid, he would walk down to join the hunters, and the hunters were sitting on the shore on these rocks, like for hours, without daydreaming, without chit-chatting. They were just attuning to the world. And at a certain point, one of them would say, "Sea lion coming," and all the heads would point in the same direction. It's not that the sea lion could be seen. It's like maybe 10 miles offshore, but they could feel its presence. And that capacity to feel the world around us is something we have sacrificed as we've retreated, we've contracted into the head. And Ilarion, as a kid, he puzzled over how these men could sit in this wordless state, not drifting off, absolutely alert. And he was walking one day under these massive cliffs and thousands of birds flying around, and not just one species, but a whole bunch of species. And he's watching, like I think as a 5-year-old or something, this chaos of birds flying by these cliffs above him. And he realized that no bird was ever clipping the wing of another bird. And he thought to himself, how is that possible? And the answer he came to was that it's possible because none of them is thinking. And so he taught himself to go for hours and hours without a conscious thought going through his head. And that attunement to the harmony of the world, that's only available through the body. The head just interferes with it. It wants to grab onto it and organize it. And how to, when I think of embodiment, when I think of the body, I think of a singing bowl. And the body, in that sense, it's a resonator. It resonates to the present. It resonates to every fluctuation passing through the world that we rest in. And what makes that possible is spaciousness. So you can imagine if you took a singing bowl and you filled it full of sand, it would lose its resonance. And that's what's happened to our bodies. We've filled the bodies with tension and sort of ideas of mechanics and we compartmentalize the body, we separate its energies. The heart is one thing, the head is another, and I can be analytical or I can feel from the heart, but it's either or. We've separated them, they don't go together. And that happens all through the body. And how to recover the spaciousness of the body so that it's once again like a singing bowl. And then what's happening is you're coming out of division, where one part of you in the head is sort of in charge of the other part of you. And when you come out of division, that chit chat disappears, that running commentary in the head disappears. It's created, that what we live with, that running commentary is created by the division between our thinking and our being, and that division is the overarching goal of our public school system. So when you think of a child, a 5-year-old, being told to sit still and pay attention to the head of the class, and if you don't sit still, you get in trouble. And we suppress the body's energy, and to suppress the body's energy is equivalent to suppressing the body's intelligence. And meanwhile, you're asked to fill your head with the right strategies, the right information, the right answers. And if you can do that, then you're rewarded. And what happens is this wound is inflicted on us, whereby our thinking and our being are experienced as two different things. And so we live in our heads and try to think our way forward and recognize that we have a being. And once in a while, we're encouraged to, listen to the body, which in a way is the opposite of embodiment, because because the metaphor listen to your body is telling you there's a wall separating you from it, and the best you can do is put your ear to that wall to listen to what's happening on the other side. And that division creates this inner monologue that is exhausting, and it's such a relief, it's such a wonder to recover the spaciousness of your body and feel the body as a resonator that sings to the world around it.
It reminds me of at least a couple of things. One is one of my favorite distinctions in your book is when you talk about the necktie and people being cut off at the necktie. And like you said, it's a lot of people, when you go to the UN or the World Bank, right? Everyone wants to save the world and we're going to do it from above the necktie, right? It reminds me of, you mentioned pollution in the oceans. There was a trip I took to Southeast Asia after I found your book, actually. And I saw all the pollution in the oceans in Thailand and Vietnam and Indonesia. I mean, it was just, and it wrecked me. I mean, I cried for days. And, at one point in my helplessness, I made a PowerPoint on how I was going to save the world and uh, let that go as I was breathing more deeply. And at some point, there was something that dropped into me, which was I was so devastated. And I can feel it now. I could almost start crying. I was so devastated seeing the pollution in the oceans and seeing these beautiful, beautiful places on the planet, walking through the jungle and all of a sudden just coming upon a big pile of plastic and being like, this just is not right. You just know it. You know it deep down in your core. And then I remember this moment of, as I was being with this, both, the mind trying to solve it and also the feelings. And I mean, this was quite an awakening in the body. And there was a moment where something just came in and landed in me of, like the closest connection a human being has to nature is our physical body. And there's no possible way we could treat nature the way we do if we were embodied. So I'm going to support people dropping into their body instead of trying to solve it from above the head. I'm just going to help people connect to, because if you had the experience that I'm having right now of just pouring out tears for days and shaking, you couldn't propagate the game anymore. You'd have to make a shift. So uh yeah, I'll just pause
Yeah,
here.
and that's no, that's exactly the shift that I've been clarifying for myself and working towards almost my whole life since I was a teenager. And just to say, the primary relationship that we have in all the world is the relationship we have with our own bodies. And that primary relationship, I think, becomes the template for every other relationship. So if we have a top-down relationship with the body, we will assert a top-down relationship on the world around us. And it is so left brain, it is so obsessing on the parts and manipulating them for our perceived benefit without any sense of the whole, without any sense of harmony. And harmony is a property of wholeness. You cannot feel harmony without feeling the whole. And what we do in our cultures, we sort of confuse order with harmony.
Hmm.
And they're opposites. Order is the result of an abstract system being imposed on some phenomenon, and then it is ordered according to the abstractions of the system. Harmony is what happens when every part of an organic whole yields without resistance to every other part, and it comes into harmony. And my go-to image for harmony is it's on the cover of my book Radical Wholeness, a murmuration of starlings. And I just the YouTube videos that people have taken, like 250,000 birds flying in absolute harmony, and it's like an amoeba in the sky that elongates and ripples and dips and moves, and no bird is in charge. They're just responding to each other and to the breeze and to predators and roosting places, and they're feeling and responding. And you can feel, and I think it's akin to a performing artist. You can feel through that responsiveness of the whole to the present, it pulls you into the present. Through that phenomenon, you are gifted with a revelation of the present. And I think the same thing happens in art, that a dancer works and works on the form, the choreography, and we're inclined to say, what a graceful dancer. And yeah, that's true, but I don't think it's that the dancer possesses grace. I think the training and the sensitivity to the music, the other dancers, the space, that as the arm lifts, it is an exquisite attunement to this moment and all that is passing through it. And by that gift, we too feel ourselves landing in the present. One result of that top-down relationship with the body, that division between our thinking and our being, is having dislocated ourselves from the body, from that ground of our being. We have left an emptiness inside, and that emptiness leaves us restless. We're trying to fill it. There's a story that comes to mind. Carl Jung came to America and traveled around, and he he ended up in a Pueblo village, and he's sitting down chatting with an elder there. And they're getting along pretty well, so that at a certain point, the elder looks at Carl Jung and he says, "You know, we think the white man is crazy." And Carl Jung said, "Oh, what is it about us that makes you say that?" And the elder says, "Well, you're so restless. You can't be content. You're going, you're consuming, you're driving, you're so restless." And Jung admitted that that was true. And he looked at the elder and he said, "You know, what is it about us, do you think, that makes us that way?" And the elder looked at him and he said, "Well, you say you think with your heads." And Jung was, "Well, yeah, yes, we do. What do you think with?" And the elder pointed to his heart and said, "We think from here." And we have missed something that is sort of lying in plain sight that other cultures are aware of. It's like there's a word in Homer that he uses in both the Iliad and the Odyssey, phrene, Phren in English, or phrenes in plural. And he uses it so many times that there's an actual book that someone wrote cataloging all the instances in which it shows up. And it's generally translated into English as two words, mind and diaphragm. And then you think, well, how could they get the anatomy so wrong? but it's not anatomical. It is their center was not in the head. Their center was in that region of the diaphragm. And they felt their thinking there. They felt the world from there. And there's one translator of Homer, Richmond Lattimore, who preserves that. He has a character, occasionally say something like, "The mind within my breast understands your words." And we like, I've never heard anyone else write about what does this phrene mean? How could they be so mistaken? Or what is that experience? And there are so many other cultures. You go back to the Egyptians and the mummifications, and they had this special jar for the heart and a special jar for the liver, I think it was, these sacred organs. And the brain they pulled out and threw away. I it's like we exalt, the brain. We put it on a pedestal. We feel the body as this machine that perambulates the brain around the world. And we are so blinded by what we have habituated to over this long story of our culture, where we've made this journey from the pelvic bowl up through the body into the head. And we're so attached to the head as the rightful ruler of the self, as the faculty that will lead us forward, and it's our best chance of succeeding, that we have almost lost touch with the possibility of landing in the body and seeing from the body and hearing from the body and thinking from the body. There's a Anglo Ewe culture in Africa that has a very different experience of the senses from what we have. I write about this in Radical Wholeness. They have 9 senses that are recognized, and they'll say, they have a word, in fact, that means to listen from the ear, but that's not real listening. When you're really listening, you're feeling the sounds from the body, you're feeling the words from the body, and their word for sense Sesalalame literally translates as feel, feel at flesh inside, which is a stark contrast to think, think at head inside, which is where we tend to find ourselves.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to speak about Cecil Alame, if I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
beautiful. I want to come back to a couple of things because when you mentioned the word harmony, I heard the word pulsation, and I saw you move your hand with this what I experience as a pulsation. And as you talked about a dancer, look at the dancer dancing gracefully. I what I heard was look at the way Grace dances her. And for me, from this place, from this orientation, we start to see the unseen forces at work, the pulsations, the harmony, the field of grace that actually moves the dancer that we are attuning to. And so I wanted to speak to that of the unseen animating energetics that
Yeah, you're
are
bringing to mind one of my favorite lines from Heraclitus, who is my favorite Greek philosopher. And the line is, the deeper harmony is stronger than the apparent. And that unseen harmony that moves the world. There's the submission that I spoke of, the, the, the hero being described as the man of self-achieved submission. It is a submission to being carried, being moved by that deeper harmony, being called by it. There's when I was a teenager, I went to Japan and studied classical Japanese no theater, and it's an exquisite art form, and it's 600 years old and has been preserved in its original form, and it is consummate. And the highlight of every no play is a dance that's performed by the central character. And at that point, there's a chorus that takes over the lines of the central character. So he doesn't, or she doesn't need to speak. The speaking is done by the chorus in first person. And and as the dance unfolds, there's a saying that when it's happening, when it is truly alive, when it is a revelation of beauty, it's as though that central character is being danced by the chorus.
Mm.
And it reminds me of, the athletes talk about being in the zone. And there's a fabulous book, I think it's called In the Zone by Michael Murphy, that looks at accounts of athletes and in their words, how did it feel to be in the zone? And football players and golfers and runners and martial artists, and it is that sense of being moved by the world. And they talk about you know football players running with the football, and it's all in slow motion, and it's all so easy. And again, that to me, that is an experience of being grounded in that deeper harmony and carried by it. And there's a runner who has an account of this run. It was sort of a rainy evening, and he was being paced through this run that he trained on at the side of the road, and he talked about the effortlessness of it. He talked about as though the wind could blow through him. And he just surrendered to it. He just let it carry him. And he came within seconds of the US record for this distance. And he sat down at the side of the road and started weeping because he suddenly didn't know who he was. Was he this runner who'd been carried without a thought, without a question on this run, or was he who he knew himself to be? And I think we all have a capacity for being carried by the world, and we're afraid of it. We're afraid of where it might carry us because we're not in control. And we're taught to be safe, and you don't want to be, you don't want to risk it all. And you know I've lived some decades upon this world, and one thing I've noticed is that life isn't safe. If you're alive, you're not safe. You're going to get sick. You're going to get injured. You're going to feel grief and loss and horror, and you're going to die. Being alive isn't safe. And I think as a culture, we understand that, and we draw this conclusion, well, if life isn't safe, then maybe if I'm less alive, I'll be more safe. And we make our lives small and safe. And that's where the staleness comes in. That's where the organized inadequacy comes in. And to me, yes, be safe. Look both ways before you cross the street. I mean, there's a place for that. But what we're missing is security. And that primary security of your being, and to have access to that. And I feel that in the pelvic bowl so palpably, that when I drop down to that and I am at one with my being, there is a security that no one could take from me, that no exterior conditions could deprive me of. The security that the body offers is not contingent. It's simply there. Safety is contingent on your bank account, the locks on your doors, the security of your walls. I mean, safety is contingent. The security isn't. And we, in that ascent to the head, we have left that security behind and are cobbling together, images of safety to ward off the reality of our lives. And you come back to that security and the empty restlessness that Pueblo elder commented on. It goes away, and suddenly it's like there is this clear, true keel that's carrying you through life, and living your true purpose is itself a form of security, because you're where you need to be.
Yeah. And what's amazing for folks like me is finding work like yours, right? I'm currently, this human being is 32 years old, and there's an entire generation of people my age and in my age range who are inspired to play life differently and show up from here, and not think about what you're talking about, but actually take it out of the book and into the world and go, what's it like to live from here? What's it like to have a life from here, to lead a business from here, to be in a romantic relationship from here? I mean, what goes on when we let go of the need to know, and the need to control, and the need to force things, and really start to open up to the larger forces at work, and the flow of life, and the flow of consciousness? How does life take form. And um,
Yeah,
yeah,
and to be willing to feel what the world is asking of you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. To really come into relationship with life and the planet and the universe and totality, and to hear the call of the moment, what's being invited in this moment. And in this moment, I mean, in every moment, there are subtle invitations that we can attune to and let ourselves be moved by if we're open to it. So I love that you said the word purpose, because it's like, it's not a conceptual purpose. It's like, oh, purpose reveals itself as we let ourselves, as we give ourselves over to these forces that are at work. Then purpose becomes illuminated as part of being in relationship with the whole, being not a separate self, but as being as an integrated self in the whole. And I often say all of a sudden we can have the experience of going from being the puzzle piece to the puzzle.
That's lovely. Absolutely.
And
Yeah, and I again, we're trained to think our way forward and decide our way forward, and the word decision, etymologically means to cut away, like incision. And I tend not to make decisions. I'm rarely aware of making a decision. I am feeling my way forward. And every I look at every fern and every snail and every soaring bird, and and in one way they're like an embodied question feeling its way forward into the world. And I feel myself in a similar way. And that, it's of that sense of the question that the quest is born, and away you go.
of the question, the quest is born. Beautiful. Yeah, and it's, I mean, just I'm putting my hand on my heart, speaking to the people I know in the world who, we there's this moment, and oftentimes it's a moment that's recreated many times of, what's going to happen, or how do I know if I'm going to be safe, or how does this work, right? Like the mind is really wanting to understand, and it's like, um, from this place that the know my in my experience, knowing can arise from not knowing, and we really need to be in the I don't know. I mean, it is a real giving over deeply to the I don't know, and awakening the trust, and like the inherent trust in the whole. And from there, knowing can arise, but it's like a capital K knowing. It's not a prefrontal cortex knowing, um or a left brain knowing. It's a knowing that comes from the base of being.
Yeah, I'm thinking like there's so many ways of speaking and ways of conceiving in our culture that flatter us, um, with a sense of knowing. Even the way we imagine the future ahead of us, and the past behind us, and we look to the future. And then you go to the ancient Greeks, and no, no, no. They say, no, no, no. The past is ahead of you. The past, you can see it. You can, what it is. You can look at it. The future's coming up behind, and you have no idea. And it's okay. That's a reality check for me. It's because you don't. I mean, we build these plans and these expectations, and map out our strategies, and there's value in that, but the future's coming up behind you. It's not something you can look at. Yeah. Yeah, and even the way um, the way we live in our heads, feeling separate from the world, leads us to imagine that we are in some way, as a human being, separate from the world. And we're taught subtly that there is a boundary that separates you from the world, and what's inside your skin you can feel, that's you, and you're in here and the world is out there. And as though there weren't a continuous fluid exchange that called you into being, that supported the world. Every breath you take into the body, you are inviting the exhalations of forests to become you. They become what you feel as you. And then you breathe out a gift of carbon dioxide that someday may end up as part of a forest. And it's a continuous exchange. But the way we conceive of our senses, speaking of the Anglo-Eve and Cecil Alame, well, we have 5 senses, and here's what they are. And it seems obvious that, of course, there are 5 senses, but then you think, well, the primary sense in the Anglo-Eve culture is balance. And you think, well, that's kind of curious, because we have a sense organ devoted to balance, and we speak about a sense of balance. I'm losing my sense of balance, but we don't validate it as a sense. And I think what matters to us is this tacit illusion that we are separate from the world. And every other sense is about a stimulus coming from the world, crossing the boundary of the self and landing on a receptor. Whether it's sight or hearing or taste, they all follow that model. So they all, in some sense, uphold this boundary of separateness, but balance doesn't. Because balance is this felt relationship between you and the earth, and there's no separation. You are held in its embrace. You're engulfed by this relationship that disputes any boundary. And so I think it's so interesting that we don't accept balance as a sense, because it repudiates this illusion of control and separation that we see as our ticket to success. Yeah.
I had quite a existential crisis when I became aware that senses are culturally constructed. Like, wait a second. This
Yeah.
is like base level experience of reality, and you're telling me this is manufactured by culture. Like,
Yeah, I mean, even the way we see is culturally determined. They did this really interesting experiment where they created a series of little animated films of underwater scenes with fish, and they showed the films to a group of Japanese and to a group of Americans. And they showed the film, and please describe what you saw. And then they showed another film, describe what you saw. And they could look at these descriptions and say, well, that's a Japanese. Oh, that's a Japanese. Oh, no, that's an American. And it was faultless. It was,
Mhm, mhm.
they knew. And the giveaway was that the Japanese would describe the reeds and the pebble, and this is an underwater scene, and there's some little fish in the background and a big fish coming through the foreground. They see the background. They contextualize what is happening, because that is what gives it its presence, its meaning. The Americans would say, well, there's a big fish swimming along, and they would describe the big fish. All they see is the foreground. So you'd think the human eye is a human eye, and it opens, two eyes open on the same scene. They see the same thing, but they don't. It's culturally biased. And I've trained myself to see the background. And you're in conversation with someone, and it feels polite to give them your whole attention. And it's very uncomfortable the way we contract our seeing to see this person independent of the context that holds us both, and to allow your vision, your seeing, to include the background. You feel their life more specifically by including that context than you do by contracting and focusing on them in a way that is decontextualized. And again, it's another right hemisphere, left hemisphere difference. The right hemisphere contextualizes, the left hemisphere decontextualizes, and it's it depletes our ability to be present. It depletes our experience of the aliveness of the moment and the specificity of that aliveness.
Yeah, and as for me, as I became aware that senses were culturally constructed, I actually started to deconstruct the different concrete senses, which is a dangerous game to play. I'll just forewarn anybody, like heads up. Um, that was a challenging trip to make. But one of the things with concrete vision is actually one of the biggest shifts I've known, and people give me this reflection a lot of you're looking more at space than you are at matter, like looking more at space than an object. And I've noticed that too I mean, again, as babies, we're taught, right? Like vision is culturally constructed. We're taught, look here, and you develop this concrete sight construction of how to see. And when we take that apart, we can foreground space and background matter, and that's an entirely different way to experience sight.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and what it does is it carries us out of the experience of things that, well, there are things in this room, and they're separate things, and nothing is alive. I mean, the candlestick isn't alive, the lamp isn't alive. It's just, they're things. And to shift that way of seeing is to begin to feel how everything is a process, and everything is part of a larger process. And then, rather than seeing a tree as a thing, if you see a tree as a process, then you say, well, where's the boundary of that tree? And you can go to the roots and say, well, this little tendril of root, that's where the tree ends. But then part of the process of the tree is the moisture in the soil, and the minerals in the soil, and the insects in the soil that are part of the process of the tree. And part of the process of the tree then has to be the rain that falls on the earth, and the mountains that push the rain out of the clouds, and the sun that draws the rain up from the seas, and the sun is held in the galaxy, and so it too is part of the process of the tree. And eventually you realize the process of the tree implicates the cosmos, implicates the whole. And the same is true of each of us. And to reduce the world to a collection of things is to in some way have that same effect on yourself. And we lose we lose our being, and we lose the processes of our being and the qualities of our being. And what I mean by that is, if I seek to characterize being, it has certain qualities, like spaciousness is a quality of being. You can hold a diamond, and if you look into it with a physicist's eye, it's 99% empty space. And we're 99% empty space. And we can feel that reality. We can feel our spaciousness, and as we recover our spaciousness, suddenly there is room within us for the world to be felt and heard and seen, rather than holding these senses on the outside of the body. Fluidity is another characteristic of being. Everything is fluid, everything is a process. And we're 65, 70% water. We're water beings. We carry an ocean within us, and it's that ocean that enables the exchanges that keep us healthy and alive. But we lose the sense that we're fluid beings. We contract into ourselves, we compartmentalize and divide, and as we do that, we lose our groundedness in that deeper harmony. And groundedness is a quality of being. Everything on this planet is in relationship to the earth. It's held by the earth's embrace. We are at rest on the earth every day of our lives. And yet, in our culture, we don't come to rest on the earth. Our energy goes higher and higher in the body. We are thinking in our heads, and we're not feeling in our bodies, and we lose that ability to be at rest. And I think there's an equivalence between being at rest in the body, being at rest in the present, being at rest on the earth. And we've turned the legs into prosthetics that perambulate us around. The legs teem with intelligence to feel this room as your legs feel it, to feel this world as your legs feel it. It's a wonderful, very different experience. But we've lost our groundedness. Centeredness is another quality of being. Everything has a center. If I take my pen and throw it in the air, it rotates around its center. Nature moves in spirals, and every spiral has a center. The earth has a center around which the moon revolves. The sun has a center. The galaxy has a black hole at its center. And we have a center, but we have displaced, or we've sought to displace our center and bring it up into the head. And then we wonder why our lives are off balance. Another quality of being is attunement. Everything attunes to everything else. There's this thought experiment that was done. It's written up in a book called Chance and Chaos. And this physicist, this mathematical physicist, said, well, what would happen if we eliminated the gravitational field of a single electron at the outer fringe of the universe? The gravitational field of one electron. And he determined that if you were tracking an air molecule in this room and following it, it would go through about 50 collisions that it would otherwise have gone through, and then it would miss a molecule that it would have hit. That takes about a second. After that, every collision in the molecules in this room would be different from what it would have been. And if you went outside tomorrow, you might feel little gusts of wind that are different and see cloud formations that are different because the gravitational field of one electron at the outer fringe of the universe had disappeared. The, the capacity for attunement is inescapable. It's there, but we turn the body into something that is a thing, the way we turn everything in the world to a thing, and we have lost that, the attunement that reveals the present to us, that lets us feel that deeper harmony. I say if life were safe, it would be boring. I mean, that's why kids play. That's, to test limits, to feel themselves. I think if life is boring, I have this image of somebody in a room holding on to all these strings that are wealth, or that are security, or that are whatever it might be.
Stability.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and 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 they don't want to let go, so they're stuck in
Mhm.
this room, grasping, holding on, feeling bored.
Yeah, feeling bored, feeling I was gonna say drunk, feeling depressed, feeling I noticed when you were saying that it really struck me your hands were shaking. For anyone who's just listening on audio, Philip was holding these different constructs of wealth and security and stability, and his hands were shaking. And I oftentimes experience this in bodies, right? If anyone's a body worker, you know that bodies that are holding a lot when there's aliveness that wants to move and freedom that wants to be freed and come online more fully, there can oftentimes be this pent upness and this shaking of like there are things that are being held on to that are being asked to be let go of, and it's like
Yeah, yeah, that shaking is a wonderful thing.
I want to ask about practices. I mean, I am curious for listeners who are resonating in what you're sharing and what we're exploring here today. Do you have in the moment practices, daily practices, anything you use to support you being able to live life from here?
Um, Anytime I'm present, I'm practicing. And I've developed over 150 practices that I share in workshops and facilitators trainings and online. I am summoned and I respond. So I don't have a regimen. It's not that I'm disciplined and wake up in the morning and do my practice and then get on with the day. But the
Maybe
practice,
what was coming to me is maybe we could invite the listeners into a practice in this moment.
sure, sure. It'd be a nice way to sort of round this off.
Yeah.
Talking is one thing, practices are another. So I've talked about that division between our thinking and our being. um, and and when when thinking and being come together, you, in my experience anyway, you feel every thought. It's as though a thought is surfacing deep in the body and resonates through the spaciousness of it and is clarified as it does. You feel every thought. And similarly, every sensation in the body is understood to be a form of thinking. There are so many relationships being processed. So there's a little practice that sort of dives into that territory with the hope that it can be experienced in a new way. So I would invite people to allow themselves to settle as a tree sheds its leaves in the autumn, to allow to fall away everything that you're carrying, to shed it, to let it drop to the earth. And as that happens, to feel the coming to rest within the body, to feel the simplicity of being here in this moment, and feel the spaciousness and fluidity of the body, just to gently bring your awareness to that, and to understand there is an ocean, an inner ocean, and every breath is a wave that moves through that ocean. And to trust subtlety over achievement, to allow yourself to feel the breath as subtly as you can. And you may feel the breath wave traveling down through the legs to the soles of your feet. You may feel it rise up through the body to the top of your head, down through the arms to your fingertips. And as the breath wave travels through the body, it calls more and more of the body into fluidity. The way a wave might wash up against a sandcastle on a beach, and it washes against it, and a little of the sandcastle dissolves into the water, and washes again, and a little more of the sandcastle dissolves. And allow the breath wave to move through the body and invite the body into its deep fluidity. And it's just a matter of recovering that sense of your own reality, the reality that we are 70% water, and to be able to surrender to that experience, to let go and experience the fluidity that allows every exchange in the body to take place. And for the moment, I'd invite you to enclose the part of the ocean that's in your head in a sort of goldfish bowl. So it's separated from the ocean of the body in this goldfish bowl. And then I'd invite you to feel your thoughts swimming through the goldfish bowl. And they'll wiggle through and hide and reappear and swim around. And just take a moment to feel that happening to feel those thoughts swimming through the head, swimming round the head. And at the bottom of the goldfish bowl is a valve. And that valve gently opens so that the ocean of the head rejoins the ocean of the body. And allow your thoughts to be curious about that and let them swim down into the body and begin exploring. And let them go where they will, let them swim where they will. And they may travel down a limb, they may even make it to a finger. And they're moving through the body, and it's a playful thing, and they swim through its depths, guided by a sort of curiosity. And there's no part of the body that they're not curious about. They explore the back, they explore down through a thigh into the leg. And just feel the thoughts making their way, swimming through that ocean. And select one thought. Put your awareness on one of those thoughts and allow that thought to bump into another thought, and they join together, they swim together. And those two thoughts bump into a third, and it joins them. And there is this growing cluster of thoughts as they swim through the body and gather thoughts into this unity, into this cluster. And it's a gentle thing, it's a playful thing. And any stray thoughts you're aware of, let that cluster of thoughts move up beside it and invite it to join. And eventually you have this one unity of thoughts, this one cluster of thoughts swimming together. And allow it to gently find its way towards the solar plexus, and then let it drop down through the body. Let it sink down past the navel. Eventually, it enters the pelvic bowl. It drops down and comes to rest on the pelvic floor. And your thoughts are this living unity at rest in the pelvic bowl. And there is a stillness through the rest of the body. The stillness of that ocean at rest. And allow those thoughts to deepen into rest. Allow them to change as they need to in order for that to happen. And they come more and more deeply to rest on the pelvic floor. And however they change as that happens, be aware that they are at rest in relationship with the world around. They attune in that state of rest to all that is. And they rest. And they attune. And as they do, you may notice that you too have come deeply to rest. in the body, on the earth, in the present. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. It's beautiful. Yeah, what a rich journey today. I'm deeply grateful to you for your transmission and sharing so fully and openly today and inviting us into this practice and way of relating with life and the integrated whole.
It's been a thorough pleasure being with you, Forrest, and I cherish the opportunity to share this with your audience. Hopefully, there'll be some people listening who may not have heard of me and might be curious to follow up in some way.
Yeah, and maybe speak to that a bit. What's the best way for, obviously, I named your 3 books. People can find those in places where books and audiobooks are sold. But do you
Yeah.
want to name some of your digital, any links that you want to talk about, any offers you want to speak to?
Well, I've got a course um, starting February 1st called Recalibrating the Self. It's a 28-day sort of intensive with practices and videos and journaling prompts. And it's the most popular course um, we've created. I also, I mean, there's so much on my website that is just free. I've got free practices. I've got articles I've written. I've got excerpts from my books, interviews I've done. Um, so that's an easy way. I also we've created it's called a membership. It's I think it's $20 a month, something like that, and there are 100 practices that are available to the membership, and there's a sort of an email prompt twice a week with journaling prompts, and I do update videos and stuff. We live in a culture that is so dedicated to forgetfulness that to come back to remembrance requires kind of a consistent little prompt. And so the membership has been designed to offer that to people. This couple of times a week, there's an email directing you to an exercise, offering questions around your experience of it. And it's how I developed the work. It's a little like a dog with a bone. I'd feel some gap in my awareness, in my sensitivity, and I would go back to it, go back to it, go back to it until it had flourished in some way.
Resonates.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, thank you again. Thank you so much for, as I told you, the impact you've had on me and my life. And I mentioned to you that I've gotten to share your work and uh, your writings with so many people, and it just has had a lot of ripples, a lot of
Mm.
beautiful ripples out into the universe. So thank you, and Thanks for being here and for being available for this conversation today. I'm just completely lit up about getting to share this with folks and that this has happened. So deep appreciation. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Forrest, and thank you for the work you're doing. It's such a pleasure to have been a small part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks to the listeners. Appreciate you being here as always, and we'll see you next time. Be well. Take care.